Okay, so apparently, Matt, we are streaming. How's it going before we start the show properly? And I look up whether the stream works on the internet.
Well, I have been getting better. I've been getting better after, I haven't been too well. So that's been good. And I also got some interesting news this week. I am now officially an award-nominated writer.
Oh yeah,
My
I saw
first
that.
graphic novel, Killaroo Semperfi, has been nominated for a Australis Award, which I am told is one of the biggest industry awards for speculative fiction, sci-fi, and fantasy. So I'm nominated within the illustrated book / graphic novel category. So that was very, very unexpected, but also very, very cool to get that news this week. So that's where I am currently at
Dude, what the
mentally,
fuck?
still processing that.
You know, that's really cool. Okay, so I didn't mean to interject, but random. I was just looking at the stream. We somehow have an extra subscriber. That's messed up.
Cool. Nice. No, that's great.
That one of
Welcome,
your.
extra subscriber.
That's probably. I assume that's just Cookie being like, oh yeah, we
Good.
probably should help our mate out and click the subscribe button.
Or Lindsay.
Could be Lindsay. Yeah, cool. All right. Okay, let me see if I know the right button to press, okay? Okay?
Okay, let's do this.
Okay. This what that no. Evidently wrong. I need to learn these things. But okay, welcome to the Modern Meltdown. The election still hasn't been called. I thought it would be. That's why I got this sick haircut to run me through the entire election, but no dice on that.
Coincidentally, I also got a haircut. People
Yeah.
may have noticed between streams I lost a lot of hair. I just was sick of having long hair, so I just wanted things to be simple.
Yeah, no, 100% the same. But like I let mine grow out for long, like way too long. It's like 3 months or something. It was not great, but whatever. So today I guess we're just gonna continue looking at the Liberal Party and just politics in general. And the consistent decline of like our culture into like culture war bullshit and various things like that.
Decline, Tommy. I think we've been on a steady hill of shit for at least the last, I don't know, 5-6 years. I don't know if it's a steady decline. I think we're in decline. We probably have hit rock bottom. I don't think it's going to get much worse.
You don't think so?
I take
Oh
that back.
man,
It
look,
could get a lot worse.
I don't know whether I'll bring it up in this stream or if in another stream, but the reason, actually, yeah, like I'll bring it up later. But like, America is always something we can look at and just be like, that's us in 10 years, and they are way worse in a lot of ways. Like they're more powerful and they have a lot more money, but in many other instances, they're just objectively worse than us. So I would not quite say that we've hit rock bottom just yet.
One of the most alarming things is I listened to a podcast called Last Podcast on the Left, and Ben Kissel talks about when he visited Australia, and he said, he copped a bit of shit being an American here in this country, which is what generally happens with Americans. So one of our good friends is an American, and I constantly give him shit for his home country. But one thing that Ben Kissel always says in that podcast is that Australians don't realize just how American they are. And I think he's 100% right in that, because the same tactics that are being deployed in America against people who are in minority groups are now being deployed, by similar perpetrators in this country as well. And that's one topic we're going to touch on today.
Yeah, and as you see it in a story about trans issues, the line was almost immediate. I was somewhat shocked to see it just be played out in our sphere. I don't think it'll get much traction, but Sky News and the right are definitely leaning on it. But first, this was something that I watched live. No, I randomly decided to watch it because I think it came up on my YouTube feed. And actually, I think Matt, you'll need to go into. Wait, how do I get you into this room?
Usually with an invite is how I get into our rooms so that I can join you in a watch party. which is what
I think I just
usually
give you.
happens in
I think
these
I just give you the
circumstances.
link, but okay. I think that's it. I think I just give you the link and do the thing. My brain has stopped working. I haven't slept like at all. My brain was just like, yeah, bro, you're not sleeping today. Not happening.
That's what happens with us insomniacs.
Not a great time, but it's we'll push on. Okay, so you're in there. It looks like. So I will change to the correct thingo this time. So yeah, I think this randomly showed up on my feed, and I was like, I wonder how 9News is gonna handle this election thing. And so on the right, we have Bill Shorten over here looking pretty good, doing his Labour thing, doing a fairly good job of just saying things how it is, correctly.
Yep.
And then on the left, we have a 9News reporter and presenter. I don't think she categorizes herself as a journalist. She was brought on as a presenter. I don't know why they're bringing in a presenter to both sides this issue, because normally you have like someone else that's on the other side of the party system to do this. But they brought her on, and I watched this play out, and I'm like, holy shit, this is partisan hackery happening live in front of me. So she's going to be asked a question, and then we're going to go through how she spins this.
On the Prime Minister. We've also heard some of those attacks coming from Scott Morrison's own side. Is that going to be a weakness, and is this mud sticking?
So the question was whether Scott Morrison being attacked by the Liberal Party is going to stick. Okay, very important.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's going to be a pretty nasty campaign, and that's what Chris Ullman was saying over the weekend in his reporting, that it's very much based on character, isn't it? And so you have Labor and others attacking Scott Morrison.
Labor and others, right? This whole thing again, it's the Liberal Party that are attacking each other here, but no mention of them. Don't need to mention them, but Labor will mention them in this attacking.
For being a so-called pathological liar. And then you have those attacks.
So she says pathological liar, omitting all of the other things that the Liberal Party have been accusing Scott Morrison of, like being an autocrat, being a bully. Okay?
Yep.
Just completely glosses over that, just this one thing of being a liar.
Attacking Anthony Albanese for not knowing who he is. And Scott Morrison's been hammering that line, hasn't he? Of it hasn't even started yet, and where is he? When all of the Kimberley Kitching, of course, terrible tragedy was unfolding, and the fallout from that, Scott Morrison went on the attack straight away.
Not the question, but okay.
I think we're going to see more of that. How that plays in the electorate will be interesting, because I think it's going to be the most personal campaign that we've seen for a very long time.
And that's it. And it's just like, wow. Yeah, so Matt, what did you think? I was the one that had the control over that and was interjecting. So yeah, what's your take?
No, that's okay. So this is look, this is really good spin. Well, actually, no. To someone who is educated, or to someone who understands the political landscape at the moment, this is very bad spin. But what Nine is doing here, and Nine is, in my opinion, a conservative media outlet now, especially that they're headed by people like Peter Costello.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're trying to move away from it. So, like Tommy says, they've got Bill Shorten there, but they don't have a Liberal colleague or a former Liberal Party member, most likely because they don't actually want a Liberal Party member's opinion on this particular issue, because that would overcomplicate it. So what they've done is they've called up one of their presenters and like, shit, we're just going to call you a journalist. And I'm sure she's gone to university. I'm sure she has a journalism degree. Believe it or not, people who work in radio are shock jocks, have journalism degrees. It's part of the industry. That's generally how you move into it. So I'm sure she has a journalist degree. Is she actively, doing a lot of writing? I'm not sure. We don't have time to go into the personal history of every single reporter. But what should happen in a proper spirited debate is that you have Bill Shorten's counterpart. So, maybe a former party leader would have been a good idea. There are plenty of Liberals banging cages around all over the place who probably would have loved to have jumped on television. So that's the first thing that they've done, and they've done that so that they can keep the issue simple. The question that's presented is, do you think that the mudslinging from the Liberal Party is affecting Scott Morrison's campaign?
And
The
whether it will
question
stick.
wasn't whether it will stick. That question wasn't answered. What happened is the spin came out, the misdirection came out. Oh, well, Scott Morrison, and it was interesting to see the fumble, because I'm sure they should have coached her before they started the spin. But it's like, oh, Scott Morrison, he'll take care of everything. He takes care of these accusations. But when Albanese was faced with bullying accusations, he did nothing. And then, the tragic death of Kitchener. Now, as a person, as a human, I just want to say this. I understand that these people make money. I understand that it's hard to be a journalist these days, but really take a minute. I don't know, maybe they don't have this sort of sense of reflection, but maybe take a minute and think about how politicizing someone's death, the death of a family person, the death of a mother, the death of a wife, maybe think about not being an evil son of a bitch for a second and not doing that. Like, it's disgusting.
Why would you do that? You can't make the big money if you do that.
It's like, and what's really disheartening about things like that is that, maybe like in the 80s, the 90s, that sort of shit wouldn't have been allowed to have been put on television, or that person would have to resign. Standards are definitely different these days. It seems the Conservatives can do whatever they want. So you can see which media outlets by this interview are being designed to help Scott Morrison's campaign. And we've seen this constantly from Free to Air Channel 9 on their 60 Minutes program that they did a few weeks back with Carl Stefanovic. They did Puff Piece. Morrison's out there. He's a family man. He's got his ukulele. He's a fun guy. And then when they did Anthony Albanese's, it's produced and structured as if he's a mafia hitman. And that's really disingenuous. These people who call themselves journalists are not. They're being bought and paid for. And, their subsidiaries are also pretty much in line with that. Fairfax Media, whom I actually used to work for in the advertising department, but when I was working with them, they were called independent. They had a very strong independent streak. Now they're owned essentially as a subsidiary of Nine Media, which is, of course, has investments by the Packers. And so, it's got that conservative bent to it. So that's why everyone has to be so careful. And Tommy's really on point by bringing up this particular interview. You have to be careful about what you're watching. Really listen to the information that's being presented and use your cognitive reasoning to be able to go, okay, they're not answering the question. That's the ability to be able to be media savvy in this current landscape. Just all you need to do is say one thing to yourself. Did this person answer the question? And if you can't say that they did, maybe have a think about the information being presented to you. But yeah, it's just hackery.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. But like, it was just most like for me that it was the, again, like the framing of the Labour Party is for me always like my main issue, because they have it rough enough, and this is why the media landscape is so against them, that whenever they try and do anything, even when the Liberal Party do something bad, when they're covered on the news in this way, it's always that bad piece of news that the Liberal Party did as a party or as a leadership gets framed in a way that it's like the Labour Party's fault, or they also did a bad thing, right?
Yep.
And so, and again, like you see it in that thing where she's like, specifically that line where she said like Labour are attacking them and other people. It's like, again, the Liberal Party are the ones doing the main attacking. So the whole framing of that is massively disingenuous because it just makes it look like the Labor are the ones that are doing these attacks.
Yeah.
But again, this is from within the Liberal Party, so it's minimizing the validity of what the Liberal Party is doing and exacerbating Labor's what they did. So,
Yep.
if anything at all.
Yep.
Although, yeah, like it wasn't like clear in what happened then, but like often when you hear about the Labor Party in these kinds of instances, it's almost just straight up fabrications as well. So that's also something to look out for.
It's and whataboutism is one of the big parts of our hello Gary. One of the big problems with our current political landscape is whataboutism. Scott Morrison has been named by multiple sources as a bully, as an autocrat, as a genuinely not nice person, as someone who makes sure that he has captain's pick choices in state elections.
Oh, yeah, we'll get.
But then it's, which is what we'll get into. But then whenever you put those questions to conservative media who consider themselves fair, balanced, trustworthy, whenever you put that to them, they always turn around and go, well, Anthony Albanese, as leader of the Labor Party, didn't act on bullying allegations that were never formally brought forth. It's that whataboutism shit, and it means nothing. If you are going to say that you're going to hold people to account, and political leaders should be held at a much higher standard than regular people, then hold them to account and be honest with yourself. But, and if not, at least put a disclaimer in every single piece of media that you produce. And I'm looking at you, Sky News. I'm looking at you, 9 News. At least put in a disclaimer. I wrote this or produced this for a shit ton of money. No apologies. That would be nice. I would love to see that.
Not gonna happen. But again, all right, let's move on to the next thing. So this is Scott Morrison on an interview on 7:30. So we're not gonna cover anything. There was just one very interesting thing that I wanted to cover, where he tries to address an allegation of him doing captain's picks. So we'll get into that.
Prime Minister, welcome back.
Thanks, Lee. Great to be here.
I think it was here.
It's an economic crisis that was 30 times worse than the global financial crisis that Labor faced, and our employment outcomes are 50% better.
I'll come back to some of the criticisms from your colleagues later, but just to ask you about the news of the day, the New South Wales court decision.
Yeah.
Let's go back to first principles. Why did you decide to intervene?
He's so smug. I hate looking
and
in his face,
dictate this
dude.
pre-selection process yourself with a small group of people, rather than leave it to local branches to pick candidates? It's the same sort of faceless men scenario that the Liberals used to tear shreds off Labor over.
Let's go back to first principles. Susan Lee, one of my finest cabinet ministers, one of our most successful women members of parliament, was under threat. She was under threat from factions within the Liberal Party, and I decided to stand up to it.
Yeah, but that's for the rank and file. It's a democratic party, supposedly.
No, I'm very serious about having great women in my ranks.
Yeah, what about the others? There's other seats as well.
Well, Fiona Martin was another.
Trent Zimmerman.
And Trent Zimmerman was someone...
But it's not... What's going on with the Liberal Party that the Prime Minister's dictating rather than the grassroots
the Prime
of
Minister
the party?
was standing up to things happening in the party to make sure that quality people who are doing a quality job in their seats should be able to go forward to the next election.
Yeah, but they should be able to persuade their grassroots members if they're doing that.
When that process on this occasion was not getting that outcome, I thought it was really important. See, I'm asked all the time, Lee, why wasn't the Prime Minister do more about getting good women in Parliament and stand up for the women in Parliament? See, I stood up for the women in my team.
It wasn't just women.
That's what the principal reason was, and people know that. There were other members who were able to be endorsed by that process, but all the members not just I. This process was done by myself, the Premier. They see our faces all the time. And the other one was Christine McDivitt, who was the first ever female president of the Federal Liberal Party. Now, she's certainly not a faceless man. She's a woman who I've worked with over a long period of time.
But what's the point
of those candidates we picked, Lee, 50% of them are women, 50% men. Of those, they
almost like a quota,
Vietnamese, Indian, Chinese backgrounds, as well as Sri Lankan and Croatian.
What is
think
this
the
identity
candidates that were
politics?
chosen,
Shouldn't they
I'd like
deserve it
the members
despite
to
their
be able to do
fucking
that? But we were running out of time.
other traits?
The job had to get done.
Meritocracy,
But
isn't it?
I will always stand up for those in my party, and particularly those in my government, where factions try to take them out.
But you're in a faction. Well, you're not in a faction.
Okay, look, anyway, that's the rest of it is kind of just thanks for interviewing him, Lee Sales, and being a soft journo. She's always much softer with, and she kind of comes off as going a little bit hard at him, but compared to what she does with like Albanese or anyone else in the Labour Party, it's kid gloves. But yeah, I thought it was very interesting that he's doing all this Captain Picks stuff, and his reasoning is that he's doing it to protect great women.
Yep.
Right? Like that's, and I'm like this whole time for like so long, it's like, oh, Labour Party have quotas. We don't believe in that because we believe that women should have be judged on their merits and all this other kind of stuff. And it's like, what? So what are you doing as the leader choosing women? Like, why don't you just have a fucking quota? It's because he's an autocrat and he'll just choose whoever the fuck he wants to do whatever the hell he to be a yes person in his cabinet. That's what's happening here.
One of the former Liberal members who gave her speech a few weeks ago when discussing exactly why these pre-selections had occurred, it's because there are factions within the Liberal Party. Scott Morrison is one of those factions and has decided to unilaterally use his power and influence in order to make sure that people are parachuted into seats instead of, as Sales says, instead of allowing the grassroots members of the Liberal Party in New South Wales to elect to pre-select their own representation. So this is what it comes down to. If his argument is that the Liberal Party in New South Wales is too full of white men and that they need to do, special extracurricular activities in order to make sure that there's female representation in that party, well, maybe that's a party that doesn't need to exist in New South Wales. Maybe that means that if they can't, how do I put it? Maybe if they can't get over themselves, maybe if they can't get out of their own way, maybe they should just be allowed to do what they naturally will do. And then an opposition party, a Labour Party, a Greens, whatever you want, which has more diversity, which has a greater, has a greater balance between the genders. Maybe that party should be allowed to have that advantage over a conservative white male party. Maybe that's an option, Mr. Scott Morrison. But the fact that, the person that is sitting currently in the leadership of this country is someone who has not been an advocate for women, and that has been proven time and time again. Once again, we're seeing one of the worst spin masters, because he is very bad at spinning. We're seeing one of the worst spin jockeys doing a very, very abysmal job. We are meant to live in a democratic country, and that is meant to flow through every single port of call when it comes to our democracy. That includes your local council election, that includes your state election, your federal elections. Democracy should be first and forefront. But taking this stand of I am for women, I am for protecting great women within the Liberal Party, when it's been proven time and time again that the Liberal Party has very little interest in having a group of diverse people. The amount of Liberal senators who have retired, who were female, who said they just couldn't take it anymore, is big. It's a big number.
And they lose like good, or at least seemingly good, people. Like Julie Bishop, from all accounts, seemed to be fairly competent at the very least.
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to agree with almost anyone on the Liberal side in terms of their ideology, because they're basically, at the very least, they're neoliberals. But at least she was competent. So, they lose people like that.
And look what happened to Julie Bishop when, they have a spill motion. Peter Dutton and the Conservative element tries to take control. And she was very open about the fact that they were essentially laughing at her. And that, she was essentially removed from a position of power within the Liberal Party, and then moved straight into the private sector since then. And through insider information, has been very successful in making sure that herself and her people and her friends and her family have done extraordinarily well, especially with being able to move around the rat test. A Liberal Party member is a Liberal Party member. After all, Conservatives always find a way to make an incredible amount of money. It's important to understand that the history of the Liberal Party has not been pro-women. It has not been pro-diversity. And that is why this continues to happen. But yes, it's incredibly disingenuous for him to take that position. And again, it's all about spin. Spin.
So it's interesting. Like, obviously, we all know the reason why he's doing that is because he's weak with women, and he's like, oh, I'm going to protect great women. But like, I don't see much pushback. Again, like the reason why I brought up the quota thing is because that's in a line that the Liberal Party have been attacking Labour on for a long time. But I don't think anyone in the journalistic space is going to attack him on that in this regard, even though it is very clear that his constituency were like, yeah, democracy, let's go. Everyone should have the merit and be voted on their own accord. But clearly what he's doing there is not that, right? And it goes to the allegations of him being an autocrat. If he can just make these quote-unquote captain's picks. And that's another thing, very quickly, that I take a lot of issue with, because the Labour Party were like under fire a little bit in the news about like parachuting in candidates into safe seats, right? And so that sounds bad. But like, I don't really give a shit about that, because you're playing the game of politics. You need to build a cabinet, right? And so you have people that are like, oh, this person is good as the transport minister. This person is good at, negotiating trades. So we need them in our cabinet, so we'll put them in a safe seat, right? I get all that kind of shit. So I'm like, whatever. But then when it comes to the Liberal Party, the framing is, oh, it's a captain's pick. He's doing the exact same thing. Okay, he's putting people he wants into the seats that he wants them to be in, rather than just letting out like what the ground will allow to foster. And the way that it's framed as a captain's pick makes it seem like it's a game, and he's just doing naturally what he should be doing. Whereas parachuting people in seems abnormal. It's like an invasion of that seat, right? And that's just the spin. That's the thing that you don't get. No one's going to talk about that kind of shit. But it's just like, why are you calling this a captain's pick? Why is he not parachuting candidates in to these seats? Because it would frame him to be bad. And the media can't have that. I don't understand it.
It's quite funny with our media landscape. They were just talking recently to Jacinda Ardern, and they said to her, how come you're not sort of experiencing, and she does to a certain extent, but they're like, how come you're not experiencing the same level of rage that many other public figures are experiencing around the world? And she said simply, we've never allowed Murdoch to set up in New Zealand. That's what they said. They said, we've never allowed a conservative piece like Murdoch to set up in New Zealand, and that's how they've managed to maintain a greater semblance of journalism in New Zealand. And we just don't have that anymore here. As I said, Fairfax Media is owned as a subsidiary by Nine News. Nine News is run by Peter Costello. They're biased, and it's as simple as that. The other two channels, being Channel 10 and Channel 7, which produce a lot of news content themselves, they're just about clickbait bullshit. And even when you go to something that is meant to present itself as very liberal, as very left-leaning, like something like The Project, for example, there's always whataboutism, and there's never specifics. As much as they like to present themselves as a bastion of progressivism in this country, they are absolutely not. And then when it comes to the ABC, the ABC does a better job than most, as does SBS. The reason for that is that their funding is government provided. We essentially pay for those media outlets, and thank God that we do. But even then, you still end up seeing that there is oftentimes a bias which plays into that. So it's all about being media savvy, getting that information, looking at different sources. Unfortunately, citizens now have to be a lot more vigilant than we ever have been before.
Okay, so Mal in the YouTube chat said he's saving sitting members who the locals have watched and decided they don't want anymore. It's different to parachuting in someone new.
Yep. And that's a very good point. Very, very good point. You know, saving people whose political careers have run their course, and then, you know, dictating to the party, no, these people need to stay in a position of power. Why do they need to stay in a position of power? Because it's all about scratching that back, you know, the fat cat scratching each other's back. One thing,
so in a way, it's in a way that's worse than
it is
parachuting, right? But like I kind of just
Absolutely.
feel like, even though like technically they are different, it's still basically in terms of like the mechanics of what you're doing, it feels, or the result, I guess, feels sort of the same or whatever.
Absolutely. But
anyway.
one thing that I want to this story can actually lead off into another story I wanted to talk about today, Tommy. And we'll jump a little bit ahead in our show notes to the very last story, just because it's a nice little bridge between these two. One thing that the conservative element, and this happens all across the world, the one thing that they love to talk about quite often is the meritocracy. People should only be given appointments due to merit, not the color of their skin, not because of their gender, not because of their progressivism or conservatism. They should all be put into these positions through merit. Now, as we just talked about in the New South Wales electorate, in the state electorate, people's jobs are being saved, not based on the merit, not based on their community support, but because Scott Morrison decided to parachute them in there. Which leads us to this article from the Guardian, where the Liberal government is currently defending a flurry of appointments to key roles of former coalition staffers and MPs. Now, this has had a really, really negative effect on us as far as the world stage goes, because these captains' picks have been allowed to happen, specifically in the humanitarian watchdog body. You know, we're part of a human rights council. We have now been threatened with our status being downgraded from an A status to a B status. And what happens is that we will be only allowed to be observers during human rights meetings. We won't be able to have our opinions heard. We won't be able to discuss. We won't be able to offer any input. And that is simply because the Morrison government has ignored the fact that the Human Rights Commissioner has to be independently reviewed. They have to be, independent to political leanings. And instead, they quote unquote captain pick someone in there, and now it's having real effects on the world stage. So I find it very disingenuous that conservatives constantly tell us that, you know, we don't need quotas, everything's a meritocracy, where it's being proved again and again and again that the Scott Morrison government has very little interest in a meritocracy. They just have an interest in making sure that they're filling in enough positions within our public service infrastructure so that even if they lose this next election, which is most probably that they will have bureaucratic support through all of their captains' picks. And that's what they're currently doing right now. And that's what they're talking about in that article that Tommy has brought up from the Guardian. So again, it's very disingenuous to say that conservatism is a bastion of a meritocracy, because it just isn't the case.
Yeah, and this is exactly why it's imperative, and like it's almost existential, the threat that the Liberal Party and conservatism in general kind of poses to our country, and why no matter how safe it might sound, you have to vote them out. because we have seen, like, it's not just this. Like, this is new. This is pretty shocking, actually. But we've seen in plenty of other places the erosion of our institutions by them doing this kind of stuff, right? For them being in power for this long.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just as you're scrolling through, Tommy, if you just scroll a little bit up, I just wanted to highlight something. I'll let you continue. But if you go up to March, look at all those different appointments I just wanted to highlight this just quickly before we discuss it further. But if you have a look at all of those different appointments from March all the way through to December, that's a lot of captain's picks right there. That's a lot of people who found themselves voted out because they weren't doing a good job as a representative, but have somehow found their way back into the bureaucracy, back into the government, so that we continue to fund essentially their lives. We continue to fund their lifestyles. And that's horrifying to me. There's quite a lot of people who should have been removed from our political system. Democracy has played its hand. People have wanted them removed. And instead, we find them straight back into the bureaucracy. We've got former advisors, former politicians, former associates. It's all, absolutely horrendous. Judges who did free legal work for Tony Abbott. All of these people seem to find their way back into the bureaucracy.
Yeah. And like we see, and like this normally doesn't have like global ramifications, but it will here. But we see in stuff like the Bureau of Meteorology, and it's somehow not being able to like say that certain weather events are a result of climate change. Like they can't. There is somewhere in some of the bureaucracy there, they are not allowed to say that line, which is baffling. Like the science is in all of these natural events that are happening at the scale and frequency which they're happening is a result of climate change, but they're not allowed to say that. And so like the erosion of our institutions, the truth, like we're not going to be able to get it anymore if these guys continue to be in power.
It's the difference in language between saying that,
Today,
this is a once in a 1,000-year flood, and this flood is most probably caused by climate change, and we need to do something about it. But when you instill people within the bureaucracy who are able to control that messaging, it means that we, as the Australian citizens who pay for that bureaucracy, are not getting accurate information in a timely fashion. And again, speaking of the climate change issue, once again, Sydney is about to be hit with torrential storms. They may be evacuated soon. And Sydney has gotten all of its annual rainfall in the last 3 months.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like again, like I've never had in my history watching the news in Australia have a flood and then that coverage just continuing to happen and the same place getting flooded again.
Yep.
Like that's crazy to me in Australia.
Yep.
So
I'm turning 34 this year. I have not seen this frequency of, this frequency of these major weather disasters in my life. And again, speaking for my experience when I was with the Royal Fire Service, we never referred to fires as mega fires, Tommy. We never had to recategorize firestorms, but now we have to. And that's
there's
like the alarming thing.
Yeah, with everything heating up, I remember there being a piece on the ABC about how the Bureau of Meteorology has to they had to create like a new, they had to increase like the color range of temperatures because we're hitting all these new extremes that we weren't getting before. So they had to like recreate or like create new categories and stuff for them, graphics and stuff like that. So. Yeah.
And the reason that the citizenry isn't getting the correct information is going back to this Guardian story is that all of these people have been placed within the government. And let's not be naive. Like politics is all about shaking hands, making deals, putting people into these positions, but it never used to be this bad. It never used to be to the point where no information is allowed to get out, where the media landscape is horrendously biased, where we don't have the right people in the right positions. It never used to be this bad. But with 12 years of a conservative liberal government in this country, they have eroded so many bastions that help protect us, that help provide information. And we've seen the effects of that. We've seen the effects where the New South Wales Rural Fire Service was ignored when they said a catastrophic bushfire was coming and that they needed equipment, where people in flood-affected areas were ignored and the information wasn't brought to them and the resources weren't brought to them. And we've seen what happens during a pandemic where we didn't have the right information right away, where states had to do the best that they could for their people, where the federal government essentially put their heads down, shrugged their shoulders and said, well, we don't know what to do. And, it's led to a very weakened economic Australia. It's led to disaster after disaster. It's led to insecurity that I never thought I would experience in my life in this country. And I don't think anyone expected that we would be.
Yeah. Just before we move on to the next one, I think it feels like the conservative side of politics in this country is also worse than it used to be. Like there is no standard anymore in politics. Yep. And also no repercussions. I remember there being a story about a politician who didn't put on their budget or their accounting or whatever for the parliamentary business that they had some wine or some shit. Yeah.
Yep.
And they were like, all right, you got me. I'm resigning.
Yep.
Can you imagine that kind of shit going
correct.
down now? It's unbelievable to imagine anyone being like, oh yeah, I misappropriated this thing for taxpayer purposes or whatever. I'm going to leave my career. Never going to goddamn happen.
Exactly. That was a Labor senator who did that. You go back to the days of declaration, like Julia Gillard, she received an iPod from the U2 singer Bono, and she declared it and then paid the money back. We don't live in that world anymore. We haven't lived in that world because no one will hold these people to account. How do you hold them to account? You overwhelmingly vote them out. That's how you do it. But we are, it is very, very difficult to galvanize citizens at the moment when there is so much misinformation out there. And you're right, Tommy, the standards are not there and they haven't been there for the last 12 years. Even again, going back to the John Howard era and his fight with gun control.
Yeah, there was National Party politicians who lost ended their careers in that.
Yes.
To do something important for the country.
And John Howard didn't come in there with his captain pick to try and keep them in the position. He knew very well that he was weakening his position, but he did it anyway. Now, I didn't agree with a lot of John Howard's policies. One of the first things that I was able to do when I was of voting age, I was able to vote against him, and I did, as they tried to erode workers' rights. But it goes to show you that the Conservative Party of the John Howard era at least had a little bit more morality and a little bit more ability to manage the country in a more dutiful way than what we've seen over the last 3 years with what started with the Abbott government, the Turnbull government, and of course now the Morrison government, which has just been 12 years of disorganized chaos in where people have been able to make themselves wealthy and then also make sure that their mates are fully integrated into the bureaucracy so that the Australian public has to now pay for their lifestyle for the next 10, 12, 15 years, however long they manage to stay in those positions.
Yeah. Not good. We're going to vote them out. All right. So the next
decisively
story...
vote them out too.
Oh, yeah. Hell
really
yeah.
Get them out of there.
Okay. So the next thing was, so we tend to not talk about American stuff here. I assume that'll happen more in the future, but I wanted to bring this up because it's I mean, this is still Australian, but it just goes to show how quickly what happens in America becomes a culture war issue in Australia.
Yep.
Today, gender theory absurdity came to the Australian Parliament. We had highly educated, highly remunerated bureaucrats from the Department of Health who have wielded enormous power over all our lives, particularly over the past 2 years, unable to answer the simplest of questions for fear of offending transgender activists. These highly credentialed, taxpayer-funded experts would rather embarrass themselves than answer this simple question asked by Senator Alex Antic.
Righto. Well, I'm going to finish up then, because this hasn't been very helpful, with a very simple question for the department, and that is one which has troubled me for a great deal of time with the bureaucracy here. Can someone please...
See, I don't believe that for a goddamn second. Okay? The only reason this motherfucker is saying this right now, allegedly, motherfucker, is he's saying this right now, is because this happened in America with the confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson.
That's correct, yes.
An American senator asked that to a Supreme Court nominee, and now this guy was like, oh yeah, we can inflame a culture war, so I'll do that here.
Yep,
Like, I don't believe for a
exactly.
second this motherfucker has been thinking about this for years or however long.
Please provide me with a definition of what a woman is. Department of Health. Definition of a man, definition of a woman. Anyone?
It's pretty basic.
Basic stuff. Professor Murphy.
I think there are a variety of definitions, and I think
a simple
perhaps to give a more fulsome answer, we should take that on notice.
You're going to take on notice the question of what a woman is.
No, well, there are it's a very contested space at the moment, Senator.
It's not just a woman who's born a woman.
But there are definitions in terms of how people identify themselves. So we're happy to provide our working definition
Is
on
one
notice.
of the. I've only been here 2 years. That's the best thing I've seen thus far. Thank you so much.
Can you believe?
Like, you can tell by the smirk that he has on his face after he answered that question. He's like, yeah, this will make the rounds on Twitter. Like,
Absolutely.
that's what he's fucking doing here. It's fucking
Yeah.
disgusting, dude.
Absolutely. That's the smarminess of it all. Which is just incredible. So, and let's look at the wording as well. Okay, so if I was to say, let me reframe that question to make it a little bit
Yeah,
easier
okay, just
for
real quick. let me just finish off
yeah,
the
go
video. We can
ahead.
have a discussion about it. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
basically,
A simple
she goes on to say,
question
oh, it's a
that
very simple
child
question.
Could answer.
Here it
Tested.
is.
It's not complicated. As a
And
dictionary.
so she looked it up in the fucking dictionary and highlighted an adult female human being, as if that's just a simple, natural way of being. But
Yep.
But Matt, I'll let you take the lead on this one.
Okay, so phrasing of the question is very important. I talk about phrasing a lot, especially in my work on the Weird Crap in Australia podcast and book series. And the reason for that is wording is extraordinarily important to it induces an answer. So if the people who are in front of them, the experts are in front of them, if he'd posed the question this way, what defines a biological woman? Right? That has a very simple answer to it. It does, and it comes down to reproductive biology. And so they would have been able to answer that question very, very comfortably. But he didn't pose it that way. He posed it in a way that he knew would put them on the back foot, because then it becomes general. What is the definition of a woman? Well, 40 years ago, the definition of a woman was someone who had a uterus, a womb, a female reproductive system. These days, what is the gender? How do you talk about it? Well, the fact is that some people physically represent women in their bodies without the reproductive system, and also they represent it physically and they represent it mentally. So our definition is broadening and it's changing. But that's why he posed it that way. He posed it in a very broad way. If he'd asked a biologist, hey, buddy, biologically, what is a woman? They would be able to answer that quite quickly and quite succinctly, but that's not how he did it. And he did it for the exact reasons that Tommy's bringing up. So it would make the rounds on Twitter, so he could dog whistle to his base, so he could be seen as the supreme conservative. And at the end of the day, these people don't believe what they're saying. It's all a dance. It's all a show. I've met some legitimately true social conservative people. They're not like that. They honestly, they will turn around and say to you, look, I completely disagree with you. But generally, I found my experience to be, especially talking to social conservatives, is that they're generally really polite about it. And I've had some very interesting discussions with very, very socially conservative people who actually know and understand the issues. But as Tommy said, this is importation of an American debate so that we can inflame people. They know what they're doing. They understand how the media works. And I mean, like when it comes to Sky News, like, could you imagine a news reporter 20 years ago speaking in the very they seem to be a little bit less biased, you know what I mean, Tommy? Like there's a cadence to a Sky News presenter. There is no one out there aside from like 9 News that speaks with that same sort of cadence. It's almost like this. It's always veiled outrage. It's just very, very thinly veiled outrage, and that's what we saw there.
Whenever I listen to someone on Sky News, I always feel like I'm being judged. It's very judgmental. Their how they present things.
Absolutely. So yeah, in that case, a very simple, like a very generalized question was asked in order to get the response that he wanted. If he'd added the word biological in there, what is the biological definition of a woman? He probably would have got a very different answer, but he kept it general enough, and that's how they do it. That's how they trap people.
So the way I approach this, because I find it very interesting, because when you're talking about words and descriptions and all that kind of stuff and like what things mean, the closer you get to any distinct or like definition, things get very squiffy very quickly. So for instance, even in this definition, right, a woman, an adult female human being. What is an adult? Right? For us, it's like like a person who's been on this earth for 18 years. And you realize things like how arbitrary that designation is, right? Because at 18 years old, your brain isn't even fully developed. Okay?
Yep.
In for the Jewish culture, you're an adult when you've had your bar mitzvah or whatever the equivalent is for the female side, right? And that's 13, right?
Yep.
And for some people, adulthood is like being able to, for women, like being able to carry a child. And some people get start menstruating when like they're really young, like before 18.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And so how we define things is very squiffy and changes over time and all that kind of stuff as soon as we know more. So even when you ask a question as simple as, what's an adult? When you get down to it, it's not that simple. Because when you try to define things get very awkward, right? Like Vsauce has a video about what is a chair. Seems very simple, right? But there's all this gray area when you get into the nuts and bolts of how to define things and to use words to define things.
Absolutely.
So,
look,
that's one of my issues with this whole
another
fucking argument.
Even another example, Tommy, in America, the legal drinking age is 21. So you were considered adult enough to drink when you're 21. It's very, very broad. But yes, that's all that was. That was political theater. He knew that it serves a lot of purposes. It galvanizes the base that got him elected. It allows him to make fun of people. It allows him to build up on the culture war, which is one of the things that the conservative element have been doing all across the world. And they are going to continue to do this. The culture war is the last thing that they have. They've failed at the economy. They've failed at the environment. They've failed at housing. They've failed at welfare. They've failed at infrastructure. They've failed at transport. They've failed at healthcare. This is it. This is all they have left. It's their last.
They've also failed at being unified yet again.
Exactly. Absolutely right. And so I am sure that this gentleman, as he moves through his career, he'll probably do, 5-6 years within the Parliament, and then he'll move over to Sky News as a commentator. It's
Yeah, you'll get some
it's
cushy
a
job in
joke.
some corporation somewhere or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. They all know what they're doing. But yeah, look, Sky News is going to play up the culture war debate. It definitely won them the election last year. Sorry, not last year. The last election was won by Scott Morrison on cultural issues. It absolutely was. The culture war raged on, and that's how they won that election. This is going to be their only tool. But then again, you've got a lot of disenfranchised Australians out there who can't afford a house, who can't afford healthcare, who can't afford to rebuild their homes after mass floods and fires, who never saw the support that was coming from them. We've got teachers who can no longer teach in classrooms because there just aren't enough teachers, and so they have to cancel and strike. We're seeing nurses strike. There are a lot of disenfranchised Australians out there. So the issue of bringing up culture war stuff is probably not going to go down very well with the Australian public at the moment. And honestly, if that's your biggest concern in life is these culture war issues, well, then you're probably living a very, very good life, because for the rest of us, the economic devastation that is coming our way, the environmental devastation that's coming our way, those are more pressing concerns for a lot more Australians. So, good
Matt.
job for being an asshole, dude.
Yeah, so what I find interesting is like watching, because I watch a lot of American stuff, and that, for whatever reason, that line got way more traction over there than it did here. And I wonder as to like necessarily why that is, because like this happened. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see if I could find. This was on the 6th of April. So it's been like 3 days since this video was released. So it's like, why is this not a factor here, given that our media is so in their favor? Like, why isn't this like this thing? It seems like this should have gotten like almost as much coverage as it is in America. Do you think it's like the floods and like Australians like having, I guess, some more like slight level of integrity more here in terms of our media, even though it is more biased? They can't kind of run this stuff because it is just clearly bullshit.
I think it's a lot of different reasons. The first, when you look at America and Australia as a society, Americans are on average more conservative than most Western countries, and they are also more religiously aligned. The transgendered issue for a lot of people in America is, it comes down to their belief in Christianity, and they've been able to cherry pick parts of the Bible which basically say that God gave you the body that you have, and that's what's intended. You were born a male, you were born a female. That's what God intended, and you have to honor that arrangement because he provided you with your body. There is a massive conservative religious element in America. That's why this plays. The other thing is that what we're now seeing in our media landscape, which is, this turn towards conservatism, we're new to it. It's a little bit more fresh here, where, you didn't have Sky News on free-to-air television until just very, very recently. Over in America, as soon as it wasn't Nixon, I'm trying to think of who their other boy is that they love so much in the Republican Party. Who was their Western actor president? Ronald Reagan. That's the one.
Reagan.
Now Reagan, he softened laws which suggested that news outlets were not allowed to be biased, right? So they actually had this media code of conduct that said, if you present this story about a politician or a political issue, you also are legally required to show the counterpoint to that. And the Reagan administration softened those laws. So they have been exposed to conservative aligned media for a lot longer than we have in Australia. You've got to remember, like the idea of having more than 4 channels on your television, that's only a recent idea. We only got digital television in this country and multiple channels all the way back, Tommy, in 2007, 2008. and some areas of the country only had 3 different media sources, which was like, Prime, 10 Capital, and the ABC. So we have been far less exposed to the conservative media than Americans have, and it's unfortunate for them. The education standards between Australia and America are also very different. The level of poverty in America versus Australia is also very different. And all of those factors contribute into looking for a scapegoat. If people were to be honest about who they're holding to account over changing society, they would probably find that their anger would be aligned with the right people. It's easy to blame kids for making the world more progressive. It's easy to blame transgender people for somehow ruining your life. It's a lot harder to acknowledge the systematic failings within the conservative movement that have affected your life in an adverse way because you keep voting for them, which means that you have to have a moment of self-reflection and say, okay, this is my fault because I've made bad decisions when it comes to exercising my vote. So it has a lot more play in America because America is in a very bad way. Their citizenry is not in a good position, healthcare wise, education wise. And so these pundits are able to come in and they're able to galvanize a group of people who may not be able to discern shit information from good information due to a failing education system, due to the massive amounts of theological debate that happens in the American education system. They are more conservative on a whole. I mean, you can go right into the American way of life, going all the way back to the point where the Puritans left Britain because they were too conservative for the British at the time. And that's what the country was founded on, was the most conservative people who left Britain. It goes all the way back to that. So I think there's numerous issues there. I don't think either country has a particular difference in intelligence. I just think that the bastions of our society have not been eroded as much as the Americans, but we're on our way there. We're definitely on the way.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. One of the things why I wanted to bring that up is because if we look over at America, we can see where we can go. And so the fact that this stuff is coming in so quickly, I think is a worrying sign. But
the biggest thing that we saw in this country, one of the worst red flags for me, was after Joe Biden had won as president in America. That election was, had one of the biggest voter turnouts of all time. Our own Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, waited and watched to see who he would have to congratulate. And that was one of the most worrying things to me, was that he was waiting to see whether Donald Trump actually won that election. And if the American voting system had not held up and it got very precarious there, I think we would be seeing a very emboldened conservative movement in our own country. And that's been the most alarming thing to me. And we have to be very, very careful. The internet has unfortunately exposed everyone's brain to everyone's other's brain. That's why you have QAnon supporters in Australia. You have people wearing Trump hats in Australia. It's because of this inception of information. I'll actually, just a little plug, this wonderful book here that I've been reading, which is QAnon and on.
You need to raise it a little higher.
This will give you very valuable insight into what has happened. I would highly recommend people read that book. Very, very good book. But Van Batten, who wrote this book, they go into all the aspects of American culture influencing Australian culture. And specifically, one of Scott Morrison's buddies is a QAnon supporter, and in that book they go into the psychology and the roadmap that got us to where we are. So you're right, Tommy. We have to be extraordinarily careful.
Yeah. So moving on to the next story, a very old punter, is that, and he took it upon himself to lash out at the PM. And this clip I haven't seen in its entirety. I've only seen the cut down stuff. And so I've only seen a little bit of it. But it was interesting to me because he seemed like this guy knows his stuff. Like he's not just some random who's like, oh, I have it tough. Now I'm going to lash out. He seems to know policy things. So let's give this a watch. Let's just watch Morrison being berated for 5 minutes. I think we all deserve that.
Yep.
Oh, that's muted.
I worked in the mines for 30 years, right? Yeah. When I retire, I expect to get a pension. Not a pension made up with a disability, right? I've got group certificates. You know when you work, you get group certificates, right? I've got 70,000. I've been fighting Centrelink for 12 years, right? You know what? A 1991 a part pension made up with a dusty Z's.
So you're getting a part pension in your
Look, mate, in 1991 Social Security Act, that's what you're relying on. Down in your wallet. Let me talk. Okay, there's been 42 amendments since then, right? In 2003, the Dusty Z's Board made an agreement with the New South Wales Government and the Taxation Department. Last time I checked, the taxation was federal, right? Saying that any compensation that I received from the Dusty Z's Board, which is now I Care, which should be changed to Don't Care, right? That was treated as income.
So it's treated as income and that's affecting your pension.
Look, mate, it's treated as income, right? Okay, a pensioner is allowed to earn a couple of $100 before it affects his pension. Right, now I'm being treated, I've been fighting for 12 years, mate. 12 years. You treat a disability pensioner that's worked all his life, paid his taxes, now he's getting taxed again. This is what you said when you got elected last time. We're going to help all those people that worked all their lives, paid their taxes, and those that have a go will get a go. Well, I've had a go, mate. I've worked all my life and paid my taxes.
So just so I can understand, what you're saying is you receive that payment out of the compensation.
Look, mate.
I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, okay.
You raise it with me, so I'm trying to
Yeah, okay. I've been 12 years fighting for this.
Okay, well, this is the first fight.
So I just wanted to pause that for 1 minute there, Tommy, just to maybe try and, because the audio isn't wonderful. What that man is basically saying is that he should be entitled to the older age pension, and that he is also being provided with compensation from a disease that he got while working in the mines. That's what he keeps referring to, that dust disease. And what he's saying is that people who are on a pension, a normal pension, they are able to go and earn a few $100s to supplement their pension without being taxed on that additional money. Now, what he is saying here and what he's asking is that he is being compensated because he suffered an injury due to his occupation where he worked most of his life. That money is being taxed, whereas someone who was on a pension could earn a few $100 extra and not be taxed. And that's what he's upset about. So he's getting taxed on his compensation, whereas someone in a position where they could work and they could do, a little bit of extra fruit picking or something along those lines. In Tumut, we used to see that a lot with people on pensions. They go out and do a little bit of cash in hand work, and that was all fine and above board. He's saying that he can't do that, and therefore he is being disadvantaged, which I think is a very, very good point. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit as we continue on.
Yeah, and he also brought up like the federal tax. Yeah, sorry, that the federal that taxation is a federal thing. So this is within Scott Morrison and his government's purview.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you were the social service minister. Hey, you've been social service minister. You've also been immigration minister. I've got a partner that I've been with 6.5 years. I've got a right as an Australian to choose who my partner should be. Right? All right, we've been to the tribunal twice. We've won on both occasions. That's 14 months ago. Why can't I have a partner? Look, mate, you ring up your office and you do nothing. They don't even return a call. All right, will you look into these two matters?
I would love to know more about it, but I need to.
All right, well, who
who
do I get in touch with?
Well, I've got one of my staff members here. They'll take the details. They'll find out the details.
Like you'd say, oh, Berejit, you can have who she likes as her partner. I have never travelled overseas. I do not do internet. I met someone that I've been with 6.5 years. I've been to the tribunal twice.
Let me see your case. Let me see your case both on your pension and on your immigration. That's why you.
That's right, mate. And look, I'm allowed to earn so much before it affects me pension. You can have $1 million house. You can have 250,000. Like, listen to me for a change. Right, 250,000 in the bank. You can have negative
Look at the smug smile on his face.
credits, but a disability pensioner can't have any income. You know, for the last 5 years, mate, you know what I've been doing? Looking after people in my flat, doing 16, 18 hours a day, and without any help from the government, a 100-year-old man and a bedridden on the other side, right? You know what the government supplied? Nothing, right? And then when I went to the tribunal about my wages, they said, oh, you're getting a carer's payment. You work it out, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 years. What's that work out? That's how much money I've saved the government.
Well, look,
Sir, I'm happy to pass it.
Hey, you ring your mobs up and you don't even return the call.
you come here.
I don't give a about you. You're getting, hey, I'm paying a death tax every week. Remember you went to the last election, so, well, I'm paying it because I've taken 200 out of my pension every week.
This is what we should do. You raised two very important issues, one on immigration and one on
Yes.
So let's sit down with one of my team.
All right, now who can I contact tomorrow?
Yeah, you sit down
Hey,
with
I'm doing this before the election, mate, because this is 2 promises that you made. You know another promise that you made?
Okay, well, look, we've had quite a chat.
Hey, yeah, no, you know, you're going to have an integrity commission. Hey, I've been to welfare rights, everything. You got the foxes looking after the hen houses.
Jack is going to sit down with you. Jack is going to come and chat to me.
What? Yeah.
Jack works for me.
Hey, you do something. I don't care. I'm sick of your bull.
Oh, all right. That was the whole exchange.
Yep. Now, the most alarming thing to me about that whole thing there, Tommy, is that the compassion that was shown to that man, who's in a heightened state, who's very upset, who's very agitated, the compassion and care that seemed to be offered to him is less than what I see offered to people in a similar state when they get upset at a supermarket. And I think that's alarming. Like, if you look at all of those staffers around, there are smirks, there's disinterested looks, there's eye rolls, all of that sort of stuff. Now, let's say you want to do this for political spin reasons, right? Let's just say you want a good moment, okay? You know what I would do? What I would have done in his position? I would have said, you know what, mate, you're raising some good points. We're at a pub. Let's go sit at that table. I'm going to buy you a beer and we're going to have a chat about this and we're going to see what I can do to help you.
Yeah, that will require effort, Matt.
Yeah, just a tiny little bit of effort would have taken about 10, 15 minutes, had a beer, sit down, listen to the issues, take out your phone, start writing notes, say to the guy, look, I'm going to take your notes. I'm writing it down now. And then the next day, what you do is you follow up with a call and say, hey, I've had a look at these issues. This is what we're going to do for you. Now, you don't have to be genuine about any of it, but you would turn that person into a potential ally. So you would take a situation that is emotionally distressing for people to watch. I was watching that and, you know, I didn't feel comfortable with it. I did definitely smirk when he called him a fucking asshole. Like, that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But this is someone who is obviously reaching out, who is asking for help, who's at the end of their rope. You know, the fact that he said, look, I've been with my partner for 6.5 years. We've won at the tribunal twice, yet she still can't be a citizen. Or, you know, there's obviously some sort of issue with her residency. That's not being discussed. You know, the fact that he's getting taxed twice.
That's a whole
the
thing
fact
too,
that he's,
actually.
you know, the fact that he's also caring for people and isn't getting the government support he needs. You know, now, again, is any of this the truth? Is any of it valid? I don't know, and I'm not going to say whether it is or not, because we can't investigate that man's personal circumstances, because no one seems to be interested in interviewing him after the fact. I'm sure that there's now a police file on the poor bugger, but what he's bringing up, Tommy, is it valid or not? Is it truthful or not? We don't know, and we can't tell. So we can't really speak to that. But from a election perspective here, from a spins perspective, because there's another little story we're going to talk about just as we get closer to wrapping this up. But Scott Morrison doesn't know how to interact with people. He doesn't know how to empathize with people. And that's why he's finding these moments so difficult. And that's why it's so hard for his spin team to be able to play it off.
Yeah. I think one thing that is overlooked is like optically, if this person was some kind of feminist with the colored hair, wouldn't be taken seriously. But because this was an older gent, and he seemed pretty knowledgeable about what he was doing, this was incredibly effective, I think.
Yes.
Like it just makes him look
100%.
super bad just because of who this person is. And it seems like he was very aware of what he was doing as well. And I think this is one of the things that you can do as a citizen if you're upset about this government, and especially Scott Morrison, is to like essentially bomb these kinds of things where he has some level of control over
when Tommy
the
says bomb,
state.
He means photo bomb. Just to be very clear about that, we have to be very, very careful of language these days.
I've already
jump in there.
Good. Thank you, Matt, because the next story is about that, about the photo bombing. It's basically just go in there and disrupt it and get in the way of like the message or the optics that he wants. And so if you're there and you're doing that kind of stuff, it stops him from being able to get out his agenda, which is basically just to attack Labor.
Yep.
And that's very effective.
He wanted to be there. He wanted to sit down, order his chicken palmy, have it with a beer, talk to a few people that liked him, show himself as to be a bit of an everyman. And as soon as that gentleman came in and raised his issues, what it did, it completely changed the scope of how that event would be publicized, and then it essentially ruined the event for him. If he wasn't so stuck up, if he wasn't so detached, he would have been able to come in there and actually make a go of it. Simple gestures, offering to buy the man a beer, to sit down with him, to have a chat with him, would have easily fixed that situation. He would have been able to calm the guy down. They would have had he would have at least felt that he'd had his complaints acknowledged. But both Morrison and his staffers acting as smarmy assholes did not help them in any way, shape, or form. Especially the gentleman who kept one of the staffers who kept smirking at the guy was definitely, it was horrendous optics. And rightly or wrongly, can you come up and start swearing and screaming at someone? No one should ever do that. However, when you're leading the country, you have to accept that you are going to upset people. They are going to come at you emotively. And, with a little bit of basic training that most businesses offer in de-escalation. And, if you go to your local movie theater, I'm sure those people who are serving popcorn have had some de-escalating training in their retail training. They could maybe assist the Prime Minister in understanding how people react with emotions, and perhaps how to best speak to those people condescendingly, and being condescending and talking down to them is probably not the best way to handle that situation.
Yeah, and one of the cool things that I've noticed also is like I watched the cut clip that they show on all the news shows and stuff like that, and that makes Scott Morrison look really bad, like worse than this one, because that one makes it seem like he doesn't try to engage at all. He just gets yelled at, and then he tries a little bit, and then it cuts, and then he gets yelled at some more, and then Scott Morrison just turns away. So it looks like he's just ignoring this dude. But in that clip, you actually see him sort of engaging with it. So
and
somewhat disingenuous, but I'm going to take it because Scott Morrison is a dirtbag in this instance.
And it just it just goes to show you too that when you end up with people like citizen commentators like us, we will actually show you the full clip, even though it goes, you know, for
We'll
us,
try our best, at
you
least,
know,
anyway.
yeah, we try our best, and where we're progressive people, it would actually be in our best interest to show the edited clip, not the full clip. So, you know, again, we keep talking about the media landscape. Consider that amateur streamers like ourselves are actually giving the you know, not our enemy,
More
but our
nuance
adversary.
and the truth than other outlets.
Exactly.
To carry on, just before we get to the photobomb thing, which is pretty funny, this was a story that was made by the Independent Australia, and they were talking about visa, the partner visa specifically. And apparently there's been a massive backlog that has happened since Peter Dutton has taken up his portfolio that hasn't been addressed. So it could very well be that this is the reason why that guy was talking about that.
There's not enough French au pairs coming into the country anymore, or is that
Something
why
like,
it's all been delayed?
Yeah, so yeah, he's waved through the French au pairs, and now like everyone else was just left in the system, and they just have not been like processed. So like they might have won the tribunals, but like where it's sitting at is probably just an approvals thing, and that's probably just sitting there, just unapproved, because they don't, you know, fund these departments. Like the public service has got massively gutted. So so that was just a neat little thing that I read before, and I thought that was pretty interesting. And here it is, probably playing out.
I can actually speak to this a little bit more too. So my stepfather is Canadian. So he moved to this country, married my mother, and at a certain point, due to bungling with his visas and his residency, we had to fork out, you know, thousands of dollars for him to fly to New Zealand so that they could finalize the paperwork so that he could fly back. You know, and that's what happened to us. It's ridiculous. You know, you've shown and you've demonstrated to the government that there is a genuine relationship there. And so process this shit. And if the bureaucracy is not able to process it fast enough, well, obviously you have failed as the minister. And you know, Peter Dutton, who he's now defense minister, the legacy of his actions as our you know, what did they call themselves? Like, he was the immigration minister or the border force protection man. Like, they came up with a bunch of different names for themselves around that era. But that was his job, was to make sure that people were able to immigrate legally, fairly. And of course, that was never going to happen with him. And so that poor gentleman is suffering the repercussions, as I'm sure a lot of people are. Immigration is an important part of a country's growth, and that's all there really is.
Especially if the country is its, I guess, internal population isn't having any, you know, kids. It needs people to come in, and so this happening is going to affect things like our GDP, if you care about that, and all that other kind of stuff. So yeah, that is an issue. But okay, so Matt, I've got the thing here. I'm not going to be able to play it in a thing where you can hear it. So I'll just play it for the audience.
Okay. Yep.
So this is a person that I guess wanted to have a selfie with Scott Morrison.
Congratulations on being the worst Prime Minister we've ever had. Congratulations.
And he looks, he's like, yeah, I'm smiling, let's go. And then like almost immediately, like right at the end, he realizes what is happening.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'll be able to get that up as a frame.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful.
It just goes out of frame. Oh, that's excellent.
So reason that I wanted to bring that up as well in sort of conjunction to what we've just seen is we're headed towards the end of our show now, so it's time to talk about the election, talk about the polling, and the general perception out there. At this point in time, we are now fully in election campaign mode, and you may say, but Matthew, he hasn't called the election yet. And of course he hasn't, because right now everything that he's doing is federally funded, so they don't actually have to dip into the Liberal Party coffers to start organising these events. It's a very typical play, and you
So
will see that. It's sad, and you will see that on both
I mean, look,
sides.
yeah,
Of the
I mean, almost every
political aisle.
government will do it, but it's like, why is
Yep.
this a thing where
Yep.
the prime minister has like leeway in terms of dictating the optics at the start of an election campaign? Like, I just don't
Exactly.
understand how this was like, oh yeah, this is a thing that should keep going. I mean,
But
obviously,
in this
the
case,
people in power
it's-
want like win using it, so they want to keep it in play.
Yep.
But like, Jesus Christ, I thought our election systems were better than that in general. Like, we pride ourselves on fairness. That's why our system is not the American system.
Exactly. The fair go system, Tommy. The fair go system. So yeah, look, we're fully in the swing of election campaigning. I was wrong. Last week I said that the election would be called this week. It still has not been called, which is blowing my fucking mind.
Part of that is because Morrison had a bunch of stuff in the courts. Because again, all of these captains' picks, there were people on the ground in the Liberal Party were like, "That's bullshit," and try to take it up in the courts. So he kind of basically could not do it. And I think it was only this morning / yesterday where the court threw out the cases. And I kind of want to just have a world where the opposite happened, and the courts were like, "Yeah, this is legit. We're gonna go ahead with the case," and how that would have played out, right? Because again, like one of the things of this undercuts is that it's again another example of this government being just completely shit at their jobs. Okay, your job as a political party before an election that you know is coming is to prepare for it. So the fact that this is happening like right before you are like forced to call it is a sign that they're just fucking shit at their jobs. And if you look at the history, it's like, oh, that's why they're always late to literally every crisis. Is because they're just shit at doing this stuff. They're just very slow to act. Even when it's in their best interest to do so, they can't muster the energy to like do all this pre-selection and get all the court stuff out of the way beforehand. Like this should have been happening months ago, but Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. If this is how they handle their own internal machinations, how can we expect them to be able to look after the country? And we don't expect them to. The COVID vaccine rollout was a flop. The testing bungle was a flop. The flood recoveries has been a flop. Protecting people and helping them rebuild their lives after the fires was a flop. This is what they do. And when it comes to their own internal machinations, they can't even get that shit right. And if you can't even get your own party right, then you're not fit to lead a country. It's as simple as that. These two blunders this week has really done poorly for him. Every single move that he has made, going all the way back to him washing someone's hair at a salon, was ridiculed. Him playing the ukulele with Carl Stefanovic was ridiculed. Him going out and doing meet and greets, he is constantly coming up against aggressive people. And when they announce the election campaign proper, it is only going to get worse. He doesn't know how to emote with people. He doesn't know how to reach people. And so we're just going to be going from controversial moment to controversial moment. So far in this election campaign, the biggest black eye that Albanese has copped is the bullying stuff, and that is immediately getting overshadowed. Now,
I don't know if that's
Sky
a thing
News,
anymore. It doesn't feel like it's a thing
it's
anymore.
Not really. Nine is going to push it. Sky News is going to push it because that's about all they have in the arsenal at the moment, other than being like, oh, I don't know about this Albanese guy. He's a bit of an unknown, which is that's
always the line. It's very frustrating. Like I keep seeing like Sky News clips of them interviewing people, and they were like, "Well, it's better the devil you know," and I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, you guys would vote for fucking Hitler based on that goddamn logic. Like Jesus, like I just can't. Oh man, it's very frustrating, dude.
If someone was hitting you in the face with a baseball bat, and then another person walks into the room and says, "Look, I'll take you away from the person hitting you in the face with the baseball bat," I'm sure you wouldn't.
Better the devil I know. Keep hitting me, babe.
Yeah, oh, you might be a murderer. And it's like, well, I'm probably not. Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I want to risk being murdered over getting hit in the face with a baseball bat. So, that's a silly argument. And the reason that this argument exists, that we don't know who Anthony Albanese is simply because the mainstream media won't allow you to know who he is. I've been following both the leaders on Facebook. I'll be very much looking forward to being able to turn off Scott Morrison's Facebook page, but I've been following both of their messaging for the last 6 months. And I know who Anthony Albanese is, and he is very clear with what he's running on. He's running on TAFE education for free so that we get more trade people out there in the world. We have a trade shortage in our country. That's what he's campaigning on. He's campaigning on, the federal government doing their fucking job when it comes to looking after the elderly. That's what they're campaigning on. They're campaigning on infrastructure, education, and helping our elderly, which the Scott Morrison government has failed to do. So if you love grandma, make sure that you're voting for the right people. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the show, where we have a look at the polling data.
No. I say, shut up, Matt.
No, you want to do something else?
Yes. Okay. So real quick, also Albanese was the infrastructure minister under Kevin Rudd. So during the GFC, he was in charge of building shit to keep the economy going. And so he's like half of the solution to us not going into a recession.
Yep.
And there's a thing that Friendly Jordies did with Kevin Rudd, where they talked about that, and by all accounts, he's good at that job. Like, he did it. It was it was like, with all the funding or whatever that he got, he just did the thing, and so he seems to be the best candidate that we'd have at this time, where like infrastructure is very important given the floods and the fires and all the natural disasters that our country is going to face. We need good infrastructure to get through that kind of shit. And so he has that experience. The Liberal Party will go and say that he doesn't have any experience because he doesn't have like a defense portfolio or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but we have army people that tells us what to do. We basically just do whatever the fuck the Americans tell us to do anyway. So who cares? And also very quickly on the line that you don't know who he is. I was just watching ABC News, and Scott Morrison was like, you don't know who he is. He's not even something. He's basically a blank page, right? And I was thinking about that and like what I would say as a response to that if I was Anthony Albanese. And here we go, all right? So check this out. So as Anthony Albanese, when the campaign is rolling and they're because I think this is a narrative they're going to throw all the time. He can say something like, I have all this history or whatever. And then he can say, but sure, I'm a blank page. My fellow Australians, what I want you to do is on this blank page, write your dreams. And I will make them happen.
I like that.
I will be if I'm this blank page, write your dreams onto me and I will be them. It's so fucking good. I hope they use that kind of shit. I assume they have the things, but like the small target strategy might not work for them in terms of it might make it so that they miss those kinds of opportunities where you can really be like kindle the populism fire.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And I think that kind of messaging does that. And I'm a little bit concerned about the small target strategy getting in the way of them being able to do that kind of stuff. But it's an excellent line, and I hope they use something to that effect.
Tweet it at them, Tommy. Tweet it at them.
I don't
because that's a good line.
Yeah, maybe I will. We shall see.
You should be like, hey, just put it out there into the ether, and hopefully your spin team will pick it up.
I guess so. I guess this is what this show is anyway. But the only reason why I wanted to say that on this show specifically was that if it happens, I have evidence that I said it. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's like the previous week, I think you were talking about Labor Cares should be their slogan.
Oh,
And then I think you predated them.
Childcare, cost of living, childcare, aged care, disability care.
Yep.
Labor Cares.
That's exactly. It should just be ... Labor Cares. That's how it should be.
Yep. It's good shit. I should be getting fucking paid for this. I reckon. Like I think it's pretty banging, but whatever. Yep. We'll see. Like they might have already been rolling this stuff out. They're just waiting for the election to be called to just blast us with it.
You've got to go to university for 4 years and become a marketing manager and then work for 15 companies before either political party will employ you. And which is, that's part of the problem, is that we don't have grassroots people involved in these political parties because they make access to them so bloody difficult. Like Tommy right there has shown that he could actually potentially be a good campaign advisor. He's good at coming up with slogans. He has a feeling for the people. He knows optics. But for you to get in there, Tommy, without a university degree and a bunch of contacts is really, really bloody difficult. And that's where I think the Labor Party, if indeed it does get elected, I do hope that it also reaches out to more of the common people. But, that's my hope. With that being said, do you want to cover anything else? Or
so one of our random chatters, who I actually legitimately don't know, which is pretty rad, Fuck You 25 said, "I'm a blank page. I've not been bought by anyone," which is pretty good. So like, what's really cool about this? Like, there's,
I'm pretty sure, because I'm positive,
okay.
and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's Cookie, because one of his online tags is "fuck you, silly."
God damn it, Cookie. Can you confirm that in the chat, please? I want to, I can make you a mod. Anyway, it's good stuff. Like there's cool stuff you can attack Morrison on with that line as well, right? Because it's like, I'm a blank page, but he is an open book that is filled chapter to chapter. It's brimming with failure after failure. I think it's pretty good. So like in a debate or whatever, I think that would be really effective. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to get that out of there, and I guess we'll go on to the polls. Unless you want to cover this, Craig Kelly getting egged.
I mean, I put it in there before we got a bunch of other better stories. But
Craig Kelly got egged. It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
you probably shouldn't do it, but
got called a Nazi.
Oh, he got called a Nazi, did he?
She called him a Nazi as well after she egged him, called him a Nazi.
Okay, actually, okay, Matt. So with UAP, because he's part of UAP, and they're spending a shitload of money this time.
Yep.
Probably a similar amount to last time, actually, but whatever, or more. It doesn't matter. They're putting a shitload of money in it, and he had a press club address where he got asked a question, and he basically said, "Yeah, I'm gonna preference the Greens first, and then, Liberal Labor," and he kind of had mixed up the two. And so I'm thinking, like, I want to believe that he is actually going to use his preferencing for the good of the country, but I just can't. And so him saying, "Yeah, I'm going to give my votes to the Greens," is like, oh yeah, I'm going to give my vote to someone who isn't going to be in office anyway. And so the second preference is going to be what matters there. And that's basically just going to be the Liberal Party. But he obfuscates that by saying Liberal Labor, in there. And so I don't believe it. I don't believe it, dude.
The UAP, the United Australia Party, has been one of the most shambolic parties that has ever come into existence in this country. Anything they say is honestly, it's absolute rubbish. The best senator that they ever had was and is she was a former UAP member, is Jackie Lambie. Anyone who comes into Clive Palmer's orbit also exits his orbit as soon as possible. The reason for that is they're shambolic, they're dysfunctional. When it comes to Craig Kelly, don't believe anything the man says because it's all bullshit. All they're doing, my honest opinion of that, Tommy, is that they're just signaling to the Liberal Party, make us your friends, otherwise we will be your enemies. That's all that is. It's just signaling. It's telling them what the potential of not supporting the UAP could be. That being said, I don't think you have to support the UAP. I don't think they have, like, it's one of those interesting things where we've seen in this country that money does not guarantee you votes. Regardless of what Clive Palmer believes, the amount of money he spends outweighs the Liberal and the Labor Party. He can't beat either of them. He can't retain his senators when he does get them elected. Their policies are all over the place. Honestly, it's a millionaire playing with a toy. That's all it is. Sorry, a billionaire, I should say. Maybe. Who knows? See,
Yeah,
even
it's
then,
I mean, it is
you
legitimately
don't
chump
know.
change to him. This amount of money.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a bored kid playing with a toy. I don't think you're going to see any problems there, but like they're so dysfunctional that they never ever get anything done anyway, and no amount of money that they've spent has led them to electing people, especially in their own areas as well. After the liquidation of some of Clive Palmer's mining interests, the base that he used to have in those areas hates his guts. So yeah, like Craig Kelly is someone who should have left politics a long time ago. He's out of touch. He's lost his fucking marbles. That's why he's constantly here in camera. There have been allegations that he has bankrolled the anti-vaccination protesters here in Canberra. Recently, he allowed a Russian spy into Parliament, signed him right in there as part of those anti-vaccination protests. He's dysfunctional. His campaign's dysfunctional. The UAP is dysfunctional. Clive Palmer is dysfunctional. And I don't believe that anything they say is truthful. They will do what they do in the spur of the moment, as the UAP senators have proved time and time and time again. So yeah. I want to. It
just seemed a little bit weird that he would say that he's going to preference the Greens, given that base. Like I'm fairly certain that all those anti-vaxxers would they generally hate the Greens because those guys are all about vaccines and wokeness and all that shit. So but yeah, that was a thing that happened, I guess, or whatever. So on to the polling.
All right, so. Last week we discussed a little bit there that the ALP took a bit of a hit after the bullying allegations, but it's taken essentially a week for them to recover. So they've it's 43% LNP preference over the ALP, which is sitting at a very comfy 57% there. So they're past 10 points. So did you expect a recovery this quickly though, Tommy?
I don't know. I feel like, I mean, I wasn't expecting the budget to have had any effect at all, but it did. Like this dip was the budget. And it was interesting that this is counting the Liberal Senator Fierravanti Wells as affecting this outcome, right? But that happened on budget night. So, and perhaps it's like, okay, the news had to cover the budget first, and then they had to cover this second, right? Because airtime is a zero-sum game, so I guess maybe that does make sense. And then, I mean, I assume they would have asked or whatever, right? So that would have been effective. So. Yeah, so that seems to have an effect. So I guess given my perception of what was going on at that time, since these events were basically at the same time for me, I didn't expect this dip. So this week is now essentially just we're sort of essentially back to where we were. I don't know what this peak was. I guess that was just before the budget was called. Budget was done. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're heading back, and I think I think this that with that the attack at the pub by that guy, this will probably go continue the upward trend, perhaps.
Yeah,
I guess we shall see.
I mean, 13% is quite high. Like that is a pretty substantial lead in this current world. You gotta be careful with polls. We've seen time and time again that polls have proven to be incorrect, but that's why we tend to use Roy Morgan. They've been in the game for 50 odd years, so they're generally pretty good at what they do. If bad optics is what's fueling this preferencing, then the Liberal Party are in for a really, really, really rough election campaign, because I honestly feel as they go out and meet more and more of the public, they are going to be encountering this sort of tension a lot more often. We haven't seen victims of the floods yet. We haven't seen victims of the fires yet. We haven't seen people who you know, perhaps have seen elderly abuse due to the federal government's handling of aged care. And we haven't seen any of those people come out of the woodwork. And believe me, they will, and they'll be galvanized. And a lot of them will be put there in front of Morrison by the Labor Party. There is a lot of political machinations that happen behind the scenes, and trust me, there will be people being set up to go and confront Morrison in public. He is not good at handling those confrontations. The optics are terrible for him. And so if this bump in polling was due to the two incidents that happened this week, then yeah, Scott Morrison is in for a rough time of it. If it starts to go above, 13%, Tommy, if we start to see, could it even reach 15 to 20%? At that point, I think, you might as well assume that the Liberals will not win. So, the budget definitely affected it more than either of us thought it would have, because neither of us felt that there was anything in the budget that actually helped Australians. It bamboozled some people. They used the typical Liberal pull, which is, we will give you money if you vote for us. John Howard was notorious for doing it. And then every subsequent Liberal government has done the same thing. We'll give you money if you vote for us. We'll put $250 in your hands if you vote for us. So that obviously had some sort of effect. And then probably coupled with Anthony Albanese's perceived bullying response also helped to do that. But now we are absolutely well and truly seeing a recovery. And the fact that these things happen so quick, you could also, you nearly say you're getting whiplash from them. The fact that this polling data has changed gears so quickly just shows you just how weak the Liberal Party policies are to help them get re-elected, because people just don't believe in it for long, which is real. It should be a really worrying sign. Though I honestly believe the Liberal strategists right now do not believe that they are going to be winning the next election, and I think they're prepping their next candidate. I think they honestly they know that they're not going to win an election with Scott Morrison.
Yeah, but I mean that happened last time, so whatever. Like, and even then, like again, like I don't think we should ever get complacent. Like we
shouldn't.
Even if the win is assured, we need to win big. Because the more people that win that are leftist, the better, and the more resources that the Liberal Party will need to expend in the next election to win back seats that were that they lost in a landslide in this election, right? That all kind of matters in the calculus of these parties. Stuff goes through in election cycles. So whether they think a seat is winnable and all that kind of shit is dependent on like the previous election. So winning big is very important, and I think it might be like one of those things where, like, if you just completely crush the Liberal Party in this election, people like Peter Dutton, people like the people around Scott Morrison might just find that their political careers are over, because if the party loses by that much, that is a sign that it's not just a leader, right? Things of that nature. So the cascade of effects that might happen if they lost in a big way, I think is well worth pushing, even if you can guarantee, even if we're guaranteed a win.
Yep. And it's like, and if I could please say, to the people in Peter Dutton's electorate, you have an amazing Labor candidate there who's ready to take that job on. She saved a life by diving in front of the car and losing a leg. She is a hero, and it would be lovely if we could see someone like Peter Dutton, who has exploited his constituents, who has exploited his political system, be kicked the fuck out of office for a genuine hero. That would be lovely to see. And I don't understand how, I'm just getting the candidate's name here. Her name is Ali France. I don't understand how she lost to him the last time. I still find it to be one of the most unfathomable things that has ever happened in Australian politics, where they saw a genuine hero who is leading an incredible life. Not only has overcome her disability, is proud of her achievements, has done so much for her community, has done on on a micro scale, she saved a life. On a macro scale, she helps people, and she's an advocate for disabled individuals. And as an amputee herself, I don't understand how he still won. So please,
You know how much he won by?
don't vote him back. It was tiny, wasn't it? It was a tiny, tiny margin.
Do you happen to know the seat?
I don't off the top of my head, no.
Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find this. Because I had a thing set up. The ABC had the really awesome like breakdown of each seat. I was looking at the Reid seat because there was this really cool ABC interview. Well, it wasn't really cool, but the ABC Breakfast interviewed both the Labor and Liberal candidates. And I was like, wow, this is a great example of how shitty Liberal Party people are, because they're just patronizing people and wasting time because they know that time is limited. And the Labor Party person like answering each question and thinking about their answers and stuff like that. But I cannot find any of the actual footage of that, which is sad.
Because I remember during the previous election, Peter Dutton said that she was using her disability to get votes, and and honestly, and again, if that doesn't show you the character of this man and why he should not be in any position of power in this country, then I don't know what is. I don't know how we lost. I don't know how Australians lost our collective sense of right and wrong when someone is so overt about just how obnoxious and nasty and cruel that they are, that we feel that that's the best person to be put into a position of power in this country.
Like you're gonna be very sad about this, Matt, but he had a 1.2% swing in his favor in the previous election. So I mean, there were a lot of candidates in this thing.
The people of Reid, seriously, come on.
No, okay, so no, he is in the electorate of Dixon. Reid was the one I was looking at before. Let's see. So the preference flows seem to be mostly Labor, except for Fraser Anning. Come on. What was the total? So yeah, after preferences, it wasn't that close. It was like 9 points. So yeah, so he got. I mean, look, Peter Dutton is a name brand. He has very high profile portfolio, and I do not doubt, given what Friendly Geordies has sort of exposed, how corrupt he may or may not be in this electorate. So we've already seen plenty of pork barreling by this government in general. So yeah.
And say, like, you look at the fact that Ali France didn't win that election is still startling to me. Obviously, the character of the individual doesn't seem to matter to people in this country, at least in that electorate. And I would hope that after being there a few more years, maybe they've changed their tune, because whether the electorate of Dixon wants to acknowledge this or not, the Australian public and the Liberal Party itself has fundamentally rejected Peter Dutton, and they will continue to reject Peter Dutton. His latest polling figures had him at a 14% approval rating should he become the Prime Minister. And it would be lovely to see him gone. As family members of mine have said, they would not be surprised, if Peter Dutton was more open and overt about possible alleged potential fascist leanings, should he be put forth as the next candidate within the Liberal Party. But for the love of God, Ali France is a genuine hero. She needs to be voted in, so we can see change brought to that electorate. But yeah, that's another week in politics.
Yeah, they might not like, I assume Labor's, unfortunately, like, for however good that candidate is, Ali France is, I think this is probably going to be a Liberal Party stronghold for a while, especially given what happened in the last election. So they may not put that many resources into it. So that's probably also going to be something that goes against her. But yeah, by all accounts, she is a great candidate and should win
Hmm.
if people actually looked into this kind of stuff. I think.
Yep.
But who knows? Maybe all of the stuff that's come out recently and everything, things might have changed. Who knows? Like it's 3 years is a long time, so we can only hope.
We can only hope. Absolutely. Well, before I leave everyone on the stream, I'll do my little plugs. If you'd like to check out my other work, you can find it on any platform that you enjoy listening to podcasts. I produce a weekly show with my lovely wife and researcher extraordinaire, Holly Soul. We produce the Weird Crap in Australia podcast. We've become, ironically, some of Australia's most popular amateur social historians, and that was completely by accident. But according to the Spotify charts, that's what's going on. So if you'd like to know more about this country, it's been great. And if you'd like to know more about this country, some of the weird and unusual stories, we cover everything from UFOs to prime ministers disappearing, the formation of the country, the Eureka Stockade. We cover all of it. And I'm sure you'll find something that you enjoy, whether you're a true crime buff, a paranormal buff, or just an amateur historian. There's something there for everyone. We also have a book series, Weird Crap in Australia, Volume 1 and 2, which you can pick up in physical edition from our great mates at impactcomics.com.au. You can also grab that from lulu.com, and you can grab it from the Kindle store as well. Volume 3 is coming out in September. And as I mentioned at the top, I'm also a comic book writer at the moment, and my work, Killaroo Semper Fidelius, which you can also pick up from impactcomics.com.au, was just nominated for an Australis award in the graphic novel category. So you can grab all of that good stuff. You can find me hanging out on Twitter. My handle is @WeirdCrapInAus, AUS. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook, The Modern Meltdown. Well, actually not Instagram, sorry. You can find us on Facebook, The Modern Meltdown, and you can find us on Facebook as Weird Crap in Australia and Instagram as well.
Nice. All right, cool. Thanks for watching. Jesus Christ. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you next week, same time, most likely. And if you guys are still watching, give us a like, all that stuff, because it helps out the channel a lot. Because, YouTube likes engagement and all that shit.
Yep.
But yeah, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Can't wait. Bye for now.